I see one more commercial about work mom or whatever. It's like
to make this argument.
One of my shirts says Woklahoma.
oh gosh, we need another one of them.
Crazy. They never had a chance.
Are we good?
Yeah. To ever
You tell me.
progress anywhere. But the ones over here, that's who's going to make it right.
Yeah, we're good.
That's the difference.
Hi everybody, I am just here and it's my pleasure and my honor to introduce my friend. I look up to her so much. I knew her when she was a legislator in the House, and she was Labor Commissioner in 2018. She's been in that job ever since, and I'm just so happy to have her here. So everyone please help me welcome her, and we'll start with questions after.
So would you like me to tell a little bit about myself and what the job is? Okay,
Yes.
so I'm in my first term, and it's one of the 11 statewide elected offices, which all have a 2-term limit, so I'm running for 1 more term. I graduated from Oklahoma State, go Cubs, a degree in business, and I worked in a bank for a few years, and then I started my own business. If anyone is familiar with a ranch hand grill guard, I grew up on a farm, so it was an ag sales business. No one was selling those in Oklahoma, so I drove to Texas, got the dealership, and ended up running that for 22 years and had 25 dealers across the state. At 45, a friend of mine, Senator Ron Justice, who Allie may know, recruited me to run for a House seat. And I remember telling him, I'm not political. I have a business degree. I've never given a speech. And he said, that's exactly what we need. We have too many kids in skinny suits with poli-sci degrees telling us how to run the world from what they learned in a textbook, and it's not really working. Unfortunately, that has not gotten better. I'm a big advocate that your legislature needs to meet your demographic. You need to have the same amount of men, women, black, white, gay, straight as your population, or you will never have true representation. So I got to serve 10 years in the House. I left a couple years early, but thoroughly enjoyed those years. I will say that if I was given that opportunity again the way things are now, I probably wouldn't have run. It's ugly, it's divisive, it's really a horrifying time to be, to try to be a statesman or reasonable or bipartisan in such a polarized world and state. But I was drawn to what the Labor Commission does because I had run bills for the 2 prior commissioners. So when it opened up, I decided to leave 2 years early and run for it. I'm glad I have a bit of separation from the Capitol and all the social issue bills. The Department of Labor is a small but very important agency. We have about 80 employees. We ensure workplace safety. So if you're a big company like Boeing, you have a fleet of safety consultants. If you're a small business, a lot of times you can't afford that, and you'll see workplace injuries, especially on a quick burgeoning business that started in a barn and it moves to, you know, a 10 building. And so we offer a great service for any small business in the state. We will come out with our trained consultants and draw you a safety plan, train your employees, make sure you're doing everything to OSHA standards, which is the Federal Department of Labor. Because we do that program, we have one of the lowest rates in the nation of people being injured on the job. We also, a few years ago, expanded it and also do training for small cities, for counties and schools. And a lot of times you'll see like a small town. A couple of years ago in Mangum, a young man was hired right out of high school, wasn't given any training. The first week back to backhoe into an electrical line and died. Well, we can go out and do a 1-day seminar on trenching or inspecting your boilers or electrical work, and it's a really needed thing, and we love that we do that. We also make sure wages are paid. If anyone has a job in the state by an Oklahoma employer and doesn't receive their paycheck, we have administrative law judges come in and we can litigate and get that for you for free. Wow. Last year we brought in about $1 million in wages for people, and that doesn't sound like that much until you see that the average claim was $850. So people in a lot of the more lucrative careers will lawyer up and go to district court. Who we primarily serve, even though we would serve anyone in the state, is somebody that may work cleaning hotel rooms on Meridian. They go in for their check and they say, the last check's in the mail, we're going out of business. The people that we can expedite those payments for, that's the difference in them not getting caught in that cycle. Right. Where your car is repossessed, or you're evicted from your apartment, or there's food insecurity, you can't get to the next job interview, and all of a sudden you're skidding into those social programs, and it is so hard to get back out. And so I can't tell you how many people that we get notes and cards from, and it's like, it may not be a big deal to you, but you kept me going. And that means a lot. I love that we do that. We enforce child labor laws. We are in charge of occupational licensure for the state, a commission where we review and make sure that that we are not licensing too many things that don't really need a license, like say hair braiders. But you do for a cosmetologist, because as I say, this hair would be solid gray, but I carefully go every 6 weeks and get it blonded, and they're putting caustic materials on my scalp that could burn my scalp or make me permanently bald. I don't mind paying a bit more to have a licensed cosmetologist who's had that training. So when I came in, we had 508 jobs in the state that required a license. We're down to 210. Now that is very middle of the road for most states, but we're licensing things we need to, but not the superfluous jobs. A lot of them we got bumped to like certificate status. One of the things I love that we do, and it's very relevant right now, is we report critical job shortages in the state to the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics. So in the past, all the commissioners would report that, and that was it. So in the last year or two, when we were in COVID and there was extra time and couldn't go out and do the speeches and the different things, I said, let's figure out why some of these are so bad. So the critical job shortages in our state, we tend to be very good in the middle. Plenty of bankers and accountants and customer service reps and all these things. But we have a huge shortage in the trades over here, and we have a huge shortage in teachers, medical professionals, and engineers over here. So how do you address that, and how did we get there? So one we're tackling this year is the trades. So we looked back and said, how did this happen that we have such a shortage of electricians, plumbers, etc., and found out that the average age of a plumber in Oklahoma is 58. Mm-hmm. If the average age of your occupation is over 42, you have a looming problem. You're not bringing in enough to take the place of the ones that will retire. That tells me that in the next 5-8 years, we're not going to be able to find a plumber in this state. And if you all have seen how many commercials Mark Wayne Mullins is running, you might find out that it could be lucrative to be a plumber. Anyone else seen one, you know? The words woke mob and critical race theory, you know, all these words. My commercials mention none of those things we talk about Oklahoma. So anyway, but that being said, we went back and I said, I want to figure out how did we get here, right? So during the H.W. Bush administration, there was a huge push for all kids to go to college. It was an honorable thought, but very short-sighted, because what it ended up doing was over those years ramping up where counselors were pushing kids into college to get jobs that were degrees that there weren't jobs for, or they weren't lucrative, and they were saddled with massive debt. And of course, there's nothing wrong with going to college. It's a great thing, but it isn't for everyone. You can do very well with apprenticeships and career tech and those kind of things. So as states saw that there was this push, they started requiring in legislatures 4 years of math, 4 years of science, 4 years of English. There wasn't time for shop class anymore. The year that shop class is shut down all across the United States, it's very hard to find, is a direct correlation of all the trades going down. And I want you to think about it. It was all these kids that found their niche. And they had a shop teacher that said, you know, you're really good in this. Have you ever thought about? And if no one's there to give a kid that tutelage or that pat on the back or that direction, they're not going to see it. Another thing I've noticed is that we have overloaded our high school counselors so much that they don't have time to be career counselors anymore. They're too busy with IEPs, state test scores, and all these things. It would be lovely if we could hire additional mental health or career counselors. And Joy has pushed that for years, but can't get the funding because we're a very poor state. So all that being said, we decided to try to pilot. So I've been visiting with Sean McDaniel, the superintendent of Oklahoma City Schools. We are looking to pilot in several of his schools this fall shop class. Nice. And hire highly trained teachers that are also basically co-counselors that will find the kids that find something they're good at and feed them into it. We've got fabulous apprenticeships and career tech programs where they could go during high school and right after, go 2 or 3 years at night while you're working as a journeyman for $15, $16 an hour. You're fully licensed in 3 years, no debt. So the reason I was a little late getting here tonight is I spoke to an apprenticeship class, and it was 9 young men and a young lady. Love that, because we're seeing more women in the trades, and it shouldn't be gender specific. And that's our future. We've got to think about those kind of things. So if that pilot takes off, we'd like to do that in other places. And then we can address maybe the next one, are the next one. So that's kind of a fun, neat part of the job that we're working on right now. And with that, I would open it up to any questions.
So that, it makes total sense about the licenses because Sean, the Patriot Roberts, he doesn't want anyone to have licenses. Like he said, his surgeon, it'll work itself out in court. And so that makes sense that you...
So you'll love this, and I'm not going to think of the word, and somebody in the room maybe can prompt me because I do this every time. The person that is highly trained, it's like 2 steps below medical school that puts you on an ECMO machine. It's somebody that it's not a pulmonologist. It starts with a P. Starts with a P. I do this every time, and I always should look it up before I come in, but you sparked my interest on it. So we had a commission meeting, and one of the members, and I believe it was Nathan Dahm, is one of our commission members, and he had said, "Why are we licensing these people?" And he said, "You know, we have people getting out of Mabel Bassett every day that we could just feed right into this." And I said, let's wait a minute. Now, this person has my life in their hands. They're working with people doing heart transplants.
It's bypassing your heart and your eyes.
You're disconnected. Yeah,
It's perfusionist.
Perfusionist. Thank you. Perfusionist. We have a very smart person in the room. Thank you. So, and I'm sitting there going, okay, now let's wait. They said, well, you know, there's only like 18 of them in the state. And I said, well, how many people are doing heart transplants in the state? That's probably a fair number. And he said, but do you see how many we could get if we got them straight out of Mabel Bassett? Okay. And I'm sitting there going, okay, now let's wait a minute.
Maybe you should tell them what Mabel Bassett
We have, now first of all, Mabel Bassett is a great place to be doing training. They're doing coding. It is a women's prison in Lexington, minimum and medium security. They're doing cosmetology. They are doing CNA classes. But I'm not sure they're ready to start with something that takes 2 to 3 degrees. That would be great at some point, but you don't launch in immediately. And I said, you know, if I have to have a heart transplant, I'm willing to pay a little more for somebody who went to medical school to be a perfusionist. You know what I mean? It's like that. To me, that's kind of important. And the argument is on this licensing is like, well, you know, we can just trust people. Why do we have to pay the government? Why do we have to pay the government to do this? Okay, here's why. So say you're an anesthesiologist and you lose 6 people on the table in 1 month. There's a problem. Right? Something is up. That's an aberration that would be reported to a licensing board. They would immediately put a hold on the person's license and do an investigation. If you did not have a licensing entity, that would have to go to district court. So if someone died in Godibo, we're not going to hear about it in Woodward. And if somebody, so you see what I'm saying, there's no connection. You have to have a reporting authority for 2 reasons: public safety and integrity of the trade. So I've had to do a lot of fighting back because it was a huge push in the Trump administration, and the Koch brothers have really pushed this to unlicense everything and let the free markets rule. And that sounds beautiful till you think about true implementation, and it's just not realistic because we can't trust everybody to be Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts like we would hope they would be, but it's not how it really works.
Well, and like continuing education that's required for a lot
Right.
of the things.
Right.
And, like, yeah, I learned this stuff 25 years ago. There's a few things that have changed.
Yes. And it might be good for whatever profession is to keep up with that.
Right.
So anyway, we try to do those common sense kind of things. One thing I forgot to say is we also do a lot of safety for citizens. We check every public access elevator and escalator.
That's where I see your name.
We check. As I always say, when I was growing up, I was afraid I might be known for my name on the bathroom wall, but instead it's an elevator. You know? And every elevator in the state has to be inspected. I have to sign the certificate, and it's except Oklahoma City has their own jurisdiction. But we check all those. Amusement park rides. The 31 states that do that have a markedly lower rate of children being injured, and always this time of year you hear about 2 or 3 heinous accidents. It could happen anywhere, but even if it's a little carnival chain, we follow them each time they set up and check that they've done the mechanics correctly and that the person operating it knows the rules, you know, weight limits, where the seatbelt goes, all those things. These are all things that we kind of take for granted. We've never asked for a new dollar. We've done everything with the current budget that we came in with 4 years ago. It's a smooth one, great agency that's not sexy, so you don't really hear about it, but we do important things.
There was a part of the Build Back Better plan that Biden wanted associate degrees to be paid for. Would that help with the trade?
I don't know. I know that, you know, it's one of those things I'd have to look at and see. And I know they've also talked about the potential for community colleges to be free and all that. I do know that in Oklahoma, we're a very high poverty, low funded state, you know, low education. And where you pay your taxes at as a former House Appropriations Chair is kind of where you correlate. So there's a lot of talk about us being a top 10 state. We are a bottom 5 state.
Yeah.
Now, the better that you accept that and figure out how do you get to where you want to be. We're 48th in the nation in overall tax collections. So you can't just look at income, sales, property. You have to amalgamate those. You take it by the average occupational wages in your state and you figure it out. We're 48th. Because of that, we're 49th in the nation in mental health services, we're 47th in road and bridge quality, 47th in educational outcomes. What you pay for is what you get. Now, I am in no way advocating to be first, right? But if we could even bump a little more and invest in the trajectories that change your future, high quality public education, great infrastructure, wonderful health care access, and mental health care. I mean, if anyone wonders why we have a homeless problem, it is because in the past, people were in what we would have called asylums or mental homes. There was a push about 20 years ago to close all those down because people would take their meds. No, these are the people that have fallen through the cracks of society, and it's a horrifying thing. Was it right to lock everybody up? Absolutely not, but there's got to be an answer in the middle. There has to be a better way to treat the people that have fallen through the cracks of society. Yes.
So how do you see, those areas of critical job shortages, so you said the trades, I want to talk about the medical professionals.
Yes.
So I can tell you as one that a big part of that is the social issues is the crazy laws that we have passed lately, is the restricting healthcare services for half of our population, is the anti-LGBTQ, and providers are leaving because of that. So how do you see your role in, I know you can't fix this with policy.
Right.
Like you have to look at the social, like,
You do.
So how do you, like,
When they
intervene
had to pass a bill at the legislature last year, and I believe it was Cindy Rowe, who's a nurse practitioner, had passed one about making it a felony if you attacked a medical care worker. I can't even imagine 10 years ago we would have even thought that was necessary. Shame on us as a society that violence has become so prevalent, that we slap people on the hands and we don't do anything serious about it, that we don't address this more seriously. So first of all, we aren't encouraging young people. Aside from that, we're not encouraging enough people to go into the critical job shortages. And that's where we've got to do. I would love whoever the next superintendent of education is, be that April Grace or whoever wins. I would love to have these conversations, and I know twice a year they meet with all the counselors, really, really, really push the jobs that we need in this state. Make them more lucrative. In a lot of states, they pay stipends. Well, when you're 48th in the nation in tax collections, you can't afford to pay stipends. Now, there was some small bill that went through for that on education this year, but we need to do a better job of that. And for instance, my daughter moved back from Colorado recently and is working as a clinical therapist. Hospitals got some money through Medicaid expansion and stuff and started doing signing bonuses, better compensating that. That drew her back here. Anybody that thinks pay doesn't matter, and we were talking earlier about the minimum wage and pay, all of these things correlate. But I did see that the legislature today passed through one of the ARPA funding bills that will send a lot more dollars to career tech system across the state for slots for medical. And I did see that Joe Harris at OU, I think, doubled the amount of class size for RN program, but we have to do a better job of getting the kids to go into them that have that aptitude to do that.
They're going into it, they're just leaving the state because of the social policy that our legislature has allowed.
Right.
And it's getting worse. But I have friends that are fleeing positions.
Yes.
That are actively leaving.
Well, and I think that we're going to
they
have
can't practice here.
a
Like,
mass.
it's not to do with pay, it's not anything. It's literally like they feel oppressed, they're criminalized. But I mean, that's a different, I don't.
No, and it's kind of a different issue, but it is the same issue, and you have to look at it from the different spokes of the wheel. I agree completely. When I was in the legislature, there were bills several times that would have criminalized physicians for doing abortion services. We didn't pass those because the State Medical Association was quite firm that we would lose all of our OBGYNs and be a desert for pregnant women to not have services. I see that coming now with the bills that were passed and signed into law this year. I think it is relevant and I think it's real. And I also believe that when we make the Wall Street cover weekly, Wall Street Journal,
Yeah.
for some anti-LGBT, another gun bill, another abortion bill, regardless of how you feel about those things, you have to realize those are also economic development issues, right? I was one that always was brought up to believe that America was formed on the separation of church and state, that those were to be separate. And I have always been a firm believer that there's one role for state government and our legislature, and that is to provide the fabric that allows the society to function and its citizens to flourish. That means you need those rudimentary things that you have to have. No one's going to build our roads and bridges for us. No one is going to educate our children. No one's going to help with mental health services unless we fund those things. Yet, we have seemed to be rather focused at the Capitol on social issues and spending all of our time on that. In fact, some of those social issues really not even being a current problem, more of a bogeyman that is off what the current talking points are nationally. We've got to get back to the basics. I would love to see commercials from all these people about what do you want to do for Oklahoma?
Right. Yes.
Instead of hearing one more commercial about the woke mob. I have to kind of Google it, like what? Woke mob? I mean, you know, it's just like, what are we, why are, and I get that.
Yeah, it must be my living room.
And we've got to get back from, we've got to stop demonizing everyone that doesn't think like us. We have to stop demonizing people on the other side, right? And the only way we get things done is bipartisanship. And that right now is a dirty word. My opponent is using that against me, that I want to work with the other side. I believe the best solutions are found when you sit down with people that don't think like you and you actually listen and find common ground and find solutions. That's how we change the world. That gives us a possibility to really move up the ranks. But it's not going to happen in this current climate, and we have to have leadership that believes that way.
Now everyone knows why I miss this lady in our legislature so much.
Thank you for that. And we need more advocacy. So Allie is a perfect example. After the tragedy that happened in her life, they could have laid in fetal positions for the rest of their life, right? But they got up and they made sure that the same thing didn't happen to other people's children. Nothing changes till we get out of our chairs, right? And so I say that all the time, and it's like, guys, you may not have a gay child. So that may not be your issue. You may not have, a mentally ill grandchild. That may not be your issue. We need to be advocating for all of those people, all of those causes. We can't just sit back and talk about it. We have to be the change. And there's like Claudia Swisher, who I mentioned earlier, is so fabulous for education. And we have to have people, there's groups like Let's Fix This, like Save Our State, like what you are doing with this podcast. We have to have people that get involved again. And I'm going to say something that's going to sound strange for a moderate Republican, but
All this whole conversation is strange.
She doesn't think we exist.
I just told my husband, he's moderating my TikTok, I said, you wouldn't believe this, but she's a Republican.
I get that all the time. Okay, but,
Well, I
but
do
you know
too at
what?
this point.
It shouldn't be that
It
right.
shouldn't be, but
We
yeah.
didn't used to be such a litmus test. If you don't agree with me on 100% of every issue, you don't belong in the party. Shame on us.
Yeah.
It's the same way as, do you believe, I grew up Methodist. Do I agree with every single template of the Methodist Church? Do I still believe, okay, I doubt if everyone in this room agrees 100% with their spouse. I mean, let's be honest. I'm not calling Allie out on that. But let's be honest, if you are a critical thinker, and that's what we need to be raising as critical thinkers, right? If there is one thing that we could do that would change the world, it's teach every one of our kids and grandkids how to be critical thinkers. That has nothing to do with critical race theory. It means that you know how to dissect and find good data. When I see intelligent friends of mine reposting things that are like from mychinabasement.com, I'm scared to even click on that link because I don't know what will happen. Will the thing explode or whatever? We have to teach our children how to do that because they're not going to learn that if we don't teach them. It's not something you learn like swallowing or blinking. We have to be that teaches them. And if we have a person in our lives that is a keyboard warrior, that is an expert on everything, we need to call them out. We got to stop just walking away from it. I don't mean big arguments. We have to say, what's going on in your life that you're so angry on everybody's, what's going on with this? I have a lady right now that every time I post something on my labor commissioner Facebook page, she gets on, don't listen to her. She's a Nazi. She's a Marxist one. Then I'm going to Google it. Nazi? I mean, like, what have I ever done? And so I decided one day to pull up her Facebook page.
How dare you advocate trades?
I pulled up her Facebook page, and everything was about her kids, her grandkids, and scriptures.
I thought you saw the comment. A comment came
So
up.
everything she was posting was all these puppy dogs, rainbows, and scripture. But somehow at night she gets on everybody's thing and is like mean and angry. She's never met me. And it's like, what makes somebody? And do you know how many people there are like that in America right now?
There's too many.
Okay, we have to be the change that we want to create. Any other questions? Minimum wage, somebody asked about that. It is the longest we've gone in U.S. history without raising the minimum wage. It is impossible to feed your family, pay for gas, and do that. An example that in this state that is very red, we don't see a lot of push from leadership to raise that. You can raise it without a law telling you to.
Yeah.
Hobby Lobby did raise their minimum wage 6 months ago as an experiment to $18.50. That's for warehouse jobs to whatever. They have no problem now with hiring and turnover, and they've actually not had to spend that much more money because you're not constantly retraining, you're not constantly job searching, you're not constantly on Indeed calling express services. It will pay for itself. The second thing is we have childcare deserts.
Yes.
If we lived in a state that was more progressive, not that we should or shouldn't, we would see this as a man and woman problem. Oklahoma is a very fundamentalist society where that childcare falls to the woman, almost always. 18 to 40-year-olds, those are a lot of the people that have dropped out because of the labor markets, because they can't afford childcare, there's no slots. So if you live in the city or Tulsa, you see kinder cares and all these. If you were in rural Oklahoma, it was usually somebody's grandma you went to church with, she watched her grandkids and 3 more. A, she may have died during COVID. B, she was either immune compromised and said, I'm scared to have rugrats with little germs around me. They shut down. And we lost that sector. And they said, well, we'll just have one car. We'll just, we'll make it go until the kids are in school. So I'm going to tell you a really neat story. There's this wonderful factory in Okeen, Oklahoma, if anyone knows where that is. You're going to go up northwest. And it's called Mountain Valley Foods. They do dog products for Alpo, specialty products, Alpo and Purina. They have an assembly line, 170 employees. They start people at $15 an hour. People love them. They employ so many people in that county. They had this problem. So they got together with HR staff and said, what can we do? And it was almost exclusively childcare. They started a mommy shift. You could come in at 8:30, leave at 2:30, so you could take your kids and pick them up. And you could come work a Saturday or night to make up your 40 hours. They thrived because they felt like you addressed my concern. Thank you.
And
Then yes. And then the only daycare in town shut down. So they found somebody to open one and helped pay for it. And they subsidized like $1 an hour of the kids that go there. And it kept it open. That small investment made those employees feel valued. That's what a labor commissioner should be out talking about. And that's the kind of things I'd like to continue doing.
Yeah, you don't even have to get out very far from Oklahoma City or Tulsa to find a childcare desert.
Right.
And I think there's under 50 infant spots in Stillwater.
I know that there are over half the counties right now have 1 slot for every 10 needed.
Yep.
That's huge. And primarily affecting that demographic of 18 to 40 on women.
Right, and it is a funding issue because the parents have kind of hit their thing like, this is how much I can afford, but we have to pay those child care providers better.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
they also have to make a living wage.
Now, I'm sure everyone's aware that, the legislature just took back the purview of the ARPA funds, the federal dollars coming in from the Biden administration. And there's several groups that have requested subsidized daycare services. I am so hopeful that some of those $2 billion will be spent on some of that.
Yeah, I know that was for us, like, we have one child, partly because when we were wanting to have two. We couldn't afford daycare for two, but I couldn't afford to stay home. And so it's like,
It's real. It's a very
that
real
was
issue.
prior to COVID.
And you know what it also does is it often affects women's trajectory in the labor market, right? Because they may not have time to do the education and keep going like they could have when their men counterparts are elevating. They're taking that back burner. Now, to be honest, I had my own business and raised my kids, and it was a lovely thing to have that, but not everybody can have their own business. So I mean, we all have to work around that, but we have to find ways to make sure that we're not leaving that segment that can be very valuable in the workplace without that work.
Do you have any thing to do with the checking the box of being a felon in Oklahoma?
So one thing I do on that is the occupational licenses. So when I also came in, it had just been passed the year before. My predecessor, Melissa Houston, had only done it like 6 months, so we really dug in. We found out that almost every occupational license had what they called a morality clause. If you'd ever done anything, and it was very gray, but most boards were interpreting that if you had a felony conviction, you couldn't. So as I also say, is if my hairdresser had a DUI in college 22 years ago, I don't really care if she's good with my hair, right? Now, if you were somebody that embezzled last year, you might not need to be a realtor or a closing agent this year, right? There's certain things. So what we did was got the legislature to run a bill that said you cannot hold a felony conviction for any license in the state unless it was heinous, violent, sexual, or pertain to your field. So for instance, we license, one of the things we license at our agency is alarm and locksmith. So what we put was if you had had a prior breaking and entry, that would disqualify you, but nothing else did. So we have seen a flood of people coming out of team and a lot of the things with justice reinvestment now able to apply for actual occupational licenses. Another thing we did with that, it was very difficult for people in the military. If they moved state to state every 2 or 3 years, sometimes their spouses might be licensed to be a social worker in one state. It's harder. We did reciprocity agreements with almost every state so that if you did move here, you could quickly and immediately get into that with a temporary license and then use it as a reciprocity. So I think we've done a lot that's really helped on those things with people getting to the job faster. That's it. Anything else?
So one thing that I see a lot is between me and my peers who are all like IT or kind of senior level engineers, is that we're going all to other states, like remotely. Are you seeing any kind of like desert of like IT jobs in Oklahoma as like?
Well, now you've scared me that I have a new one to worry about.
Okay.
Because to be totally honest, I have not seen that. And what we do is like yearly or every 6 months surveys with all these different industries. That has not popped up or percolated high enough yet, but that doesn't mean it's not coming. And if you're seeing that, that may be something we need to worry about. I do believe that remote work is going to change occupations for everyone. I mean, I just do. When you can do that when you can work for a company in California and live here, vice versa, people are going to be moving to where they like the social situation or they like the cost of living or where their families are or different things, or they're even going to live a nomadic lifestyle, you know, where they can go around different places. So I do think it's going to affect everything. I haven't heard it about that, but it's one of those things that we're going to have to really monitor because I think that is going to make it, we're going to see a lot more holes pop up because of the remote possibilities. And even us at the Department of Labor, we have 8 divisions, 2 meet with the public, but we had left it still to this day and didn't plan on it that if you're still getting your workload done and you aren't a job that had to meet with the public, we're fine with you working at home. You just need to show your program manager you're still meeting that same level. I think that's going to change commercial real estate. It's because of gas prices. We're going to see more of that. Daycare, different things. Some people want to be in. I can't get anything done at home. Some I'm at home. I get twice as much done. I think we're going to have to be flexible, and I think that HR is going to be huge in the next few years on things like the daycare dilemmas and the remote work and reassessing how we work in America. If you're, you know, it's just real. It's reality.
I will say I just got a new job, and the same job in Oklahoma was like $18 an hour, but then I got a job that is not in Oklahoma and I'm making $28 an hour. So it was like a huge difference.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not actually working in Oklahoma.
Right. He's working in New York.
Yeah, I got an 80% raise,
Yeah.
but not working in Oklahoma.
But now my assumption is you're living here where the wages, where the taxes are lower, and you can buy a better house and do those kind of things. You're probably paying your taxes here.
Yeah,
So as long as we're, what we just need to make sure is that the main industries, for instance, we've done a lot to really ramp up the aerospace industry in the state by diversifying. When I first came in, we talked a lot about how oil and gas was really just everything and agriculture number 2. Now, aerospace is number 3 in the state, and that's for a couple of reasons, and we do need to give credit to our congressional representation. We didn't lose any bases in the Bragg Commission. And aerospace jobs want to be located contiguous to a base. So you'll see Boeing and Nordam and all these different ones that want to be close. We have to keep pumping out the engineers though, or we will not keep them. A neat stat, OSU, I went and toured 2 years ago, they totally redid their engineering department. 10 years before that, it was 1 female for every 9 males. That year, 2 years ago when I went, it was the first year they had 50-50 enrollment, man and woman. And I love to see that. I think that we really do need to consider that things shouldn't be specified by gender. We see male nurses all the time, whatever it is. I think it should be on your aptitude and not your gender.
Are there any programs that we're working on that tend to work for a lot of those gender discrepancies? Because again, I work in IT, and the statistic is 20 to 25% of the workforce are female engineers, and I'm a guy and I'm confused as to why this is.
Right.
But I don't get those resumes going across my desk, and what are we doing to increase the number of
Well, as far as a state program, we're really not, because we are a bare bones state, 48th in the nation. You can only do the rudimentary things that keep the doors open, right? That's just, it's reality. You're lucky if you can keep structurally, proper bridges to doors open at schools. So I think it is something we should look at going forward, but there isn't a lot of push on that. Now, for instance, I work a lot with the trades, and they have made huge marketing pushes for young women to come into the field. And I think that it may be up to industry to do it more than necessarily government, but I think that you're absolutely right. There would be no reason for that kind of. Now, if there might be something where you needed brawn and strength, I know, there are some things like firefighters when you have to carry a body over and so heavy weight, not that you certainly can't, but it might be a bit harder. I know I would not be able to do that. I don't have good arm strength, unfortunately, but very few things besides those kind of things would matter for man or woman on the profession.
All right. But thank you so much
Yes,
for coming.
thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Incredible conversation. And like I said, it's I don't know, it's just nice to hear from a moderate Republican, and you stayed this way the whole time. There's space for all of us.
There is. So thank you. Appreciate you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so is my daughter have the address for your store?
Okay.
Yeah, good to know. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the Zoom before I turn it off?
Thank you, Zimmer.
Okay, I'm gonna turn it off then.
Lots of great,
Yes, all of those things. All of those things, yes.
lots of for Hobby Lobby.
But I'm not a fan of Hobby Lobby, but you can't fault them for increasing their pay.
right.
That you can fault them for a lot of things.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
All right, y'all, I'm signing off here. There's a few second delay.
I don't want to say I'm promoting all of the things that they do, but yeah.
Thank you.
It's a good